Life in the Holler by Nada Smith Kelley.
My grandfather, Moses, and grandmother, Laura Johnson Dammer, were the first to live in the holler. Aunt Hofi wrote about it in her memories of the holler. She told about her family barely scraping out a living on the hillsides of their little 56-acre farm.
They worked from sun up to sundown, as she put it. I never knew my grandfather Moses, as he was killed in an accident in his late 40s. My grandmother Laura was left with 7 children to raise. Since I was only 9 years old when she died, I don't remember a lot about her. She had auburn hair, had a good sense of humor, and sometimes smoked a pipe. I remember being in the big bed in the corner of the living room. I watched the reflections from the fireplace as it danced on the rafters overhead. I had an earache, and Grandmother was putting oil in my ear and heating towels to put on it. I could hear soft laughter around the big fireplace that night. She and Grandfather are buried on top of the knoll in the holler. My dad, Otis Smallwood Smith, bought the hollow for my mom, Opal, and her brothers and sisters after my grandmother died. Dad was a conductor on the N&W Railroad, so we lived some of our lives in Williamson, West Virginia, a railroad town about 200 miles away. He and Mom loved her home place, and we came to the holler every summer to raise a garden and get away from the coal dust and noise of the trains. We would sit in the swing on the front porch and listen to the crickets and smell the fresh air. We could hear the babbling of the little creek in front of the house. In the hot summer, we would wade in the creek and dam up parts of it and go swimming. Dad could stay under the water the longest, and we would play a game trying to find him. Sometimes I would get scared that he had drowned. Mom had such pretty flowers. She had a trellis of roses at the front gate with beautiful lilies growing along the front walk. Finally, Mom and Dad decided to move us back to the holler for good. Dad arranged to come on weekends. My brother, sister, and I were nearing high school age, and Dad thought it best to raise us in the country. It sure did take some getting used to. We had to carry all our water from the big spring. That was my job. I was always scared of bugs and spiders. There was a big black spider there at the spring just waiting to get me every time I went. Mom tried to teach me to milk the cow. I must have pulled the wrong faucet because the old cow got so sick that she threw up. We had no electricity at first. Dad read the Bible to us from the light of the kerosene lamp. We had 2 gardens, and on the hillside we had lots of strawberries and blackberries. Mom canned all summer long. It was my job to wash the jars, as my hands were small and I could get them clean inside. My mom and brother, Bud, loved working outside. Bud chopped wood and carried in the coal for the warm morning stove that had replaced the big fireplace. We raised corn, tobacco, and hay. We graded and tied the tobacco in the barn in the fall. We would put quilts over our laps to keep us warm. Dad would hire some neighbor boys to help us, and we would sing and tell big tales as we worked. My sister, Janny, and I preferred the housework. We would try to keep the floors clean. We would wax and shine them, but Bud would come in with his dog Skippy and track mud all over the place. I wasn't much of a farm girl. I hated getting dirt under my fingernails and always tried to get out of working outside. One hot summer day, I did a pretty good job of faking a headache. The rest of the family had gone to work in the tobacco patch. I was in my bedroom on the second floor. I heard footsteps coming from my brother's attic bedroom. The footsteps got closer and closer. I was glued to my bed and could hardly breathe. Finally, I eased myself up and flew as fast as I could down to the tobacco field. They all laughed at me. They told me that it was the tin roof popping from the hot sun. I worked the rest of the day without complaining. Dad started remodeling the old log house right away. Dad could do anything that he put his mind to do. He put shingles over the logs to make it warmer. He built an addition on one side, a downstairs living room and an upstairs bedroom. Mom got a pretty living room set and some store-bought drapes and a rug. She always got the most compliments, however, on the original big living room with its varnished rafters and hardwood floors. She made slip covers for the chair and couch and made footstools out of bushel baskets. She made fresh flower arrangements and hung them up in old lanterns. Dad made shelves all over the house. He made a big corner window with 2 big windows that had been thrown away from the roundhouse at the railroad yard. Mom made a rock and flower garden up on the hill behind it. We had my grandmother's antique organ. Mom played the slow hymns, but Dad liked the fast quartet songs, so Janny would play them and we would sing different parts. Dad was always working on the dirt road, trying to straighten and rebuild it. The holler was known as the Muddy Holler. It was almost impossible to get a car in there after a rain. When we would get stuck in the mud and Dad would say, "Just shoot the gas to it," and away we would go, swaying from one side to the other, praying we wouldn't go over the bank. Bud hooked up our old workhorse and pulled many a car out of the mud. There was a storage place in the attic where you found all the typical attic things of generations past. We found love letters, souvenirs. It was a spooky place to me. I just knew ghosts and mice lived together back in that dark hole. Dad remodeled the attic, though, and put a door on the hole. He built pretty bookcases and bunk beds for Bud up there. It became our favorite place after Janny left for college and Dad was away working. Mom would read to us, things like Tom Sawyer and Uncle Tom's Cabin. We got a subscription to the Collier magazine. It had a continuing story and we couldn't wait to go to the mailbox to get it. We also subscribed to Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, a Bugs Bunny comic book. What a treat that was. We loved to listen to the rain on the tin roof. Mom would always finish her reading with the Bible and praying with us. We walked the muddy 1.5 miles to catch the school bus at the general store. We could catch the bus also by going up the Statzer Hill, and the bus stopped at the mailbox in front of the church. We took turns each day, one going by to the mail and the other ones going by the store. Bud and I always preferred going by the store since we got to charge a nickel a day for candy. Janny liked going by the mailbox since she was expecting a letter from her sweetheart, Harold. We always walked up the muddy hill on Wednesday night to prayer meeting. Mom always said that the people who really loved the Lord would make an effort to be in prayer meeting. We had a grape arbor at the side of the house and it produced delicious grapes. It also was a good place to kiss your boyfriend goodnight, especially when there was a full moon. The cellar was right off the back porch. It had a cold water running through it. Overhead was the smokehouse where we kept our hams and meat that we butchered every year. Killing hogs was a busy time, and our neighbors and relatives all lent us a hand to get the meat taken care of in a hurry. We would always be rewarded with a good breakfast of fresh tenderloin, biscuits, and gravy. Good eatin'. Saturdays were our busiest days. We made sure our house was spick and span, shoes polished, clothes ready for Sunday. Mom would make lemon pies and rolls. We were all excited because this was the day Dad got home. He was so handsome, all dressed up. He rode the train and bus home. We were anxious for him to open his suitcase because he usually had something for us, a Hershey candy bar or something. Some Saturdays, though, he brought old tomato plants or seeds that had to be planted. He'd say, "Come on, young'uns, let's get these planted before it rains." Sunday were our rest days. We went to Sunday school and church. Church would drag on and on with long-winded preachers. Finally, after everybody preached that wanted to, and everybody sung that wanted to, and everybody testified that wanted to, we headed for home. Dad usually invited half the church home to a good dinner, preachers, good-looking boys, etc. Relatives would come in the afternoon. We would have a good softball game, play croquet, or ante-over, a game where you throw a ball over the roof of the house. Sometimes we'd go swing on the grapevine swings. I finished my high school years and went away to college and on to Washington, D.C. I returned to be married to Joe Kelley in Honeacres Chapel on the hill. We had our wedding reception in the holler. The front yard was full of people who had to walk or get stuck in the mud that night. Yes, it rained. Uncle Solly finally got his truck in to pick me up and take me to church. I thought for a while I would have to walk in the mud in my wedding gown. It was a sight to see. Good old muddy holler. It was especially funny to watch our guests, the city slickers that I brought from Washington, D.C. I guess I forgot to tell them about the holler. Time has passed now since we all left the holler to go our own separate ways. Things have changed. There are new owners, new roads, and the old log house is burned down. My mother's last trip to the holler was about 4 months before she died. They tell me that she walked all over the little farm, recalling memories and saying her last goodbyes, knowing soon she would be saying hello to her mom and dad as she passed by their graves. The last time I saw my mom leave the holler was in a dream a week before she died. She was leading me up the Statzer Hill to church. She had on a beautiful black suit and a pretty smile on her face. When we got to the top, she let go of my hand and ascended on up in the air, still smiling as she waved goodbye. A week later, as I was called to her bedside, she died with these words on her lips. "Oh, children, how beautiful, it's so beautiful." I believe she has found another little holler, one that will never fade away, but will last forever.